Cracklin Cornbread is popular in Appalachia. So if you don't know what Cracklin Cornbread is, it's cornbread with cracklins in it. If you don't know what cracklins are made from, it's the process of making lard. So if you, like we would call it, if you're killing hogs, if it's killing hog time of the year to kill hogs, and you process the meat, well, what you do with the pig or hog fat, we would say, is you render it for lard. And then what's left over during that rendering process are these little crispy pieces of pork. And that's what cracklins are. That's what's left over from that process. When I was growing up, Granny and Pap didn't have hogs. Now, my Papa Wade did. I can remember when he had them, but in my lifetime, Granny and Pap didn't keep hogs. We didn't really have any place to put them. But they loved to render lard, so they would buy hog fat from a local farmer, a man who did have hogs and would kill hogs every year, every fall of the year. And then they would render that fat down, and then they would save the little cracklin pieces, and then they would make cornbread from it, or just eat it. Granny liked to eat them. You think of cracklins, they're not really similar, but it puts you in the mind of pork rinds. So if you've ever had pork rinds, maybe at a county fair or at your local gas station or whatever, you can buy them like that, or in the grocery store. But it's kind of similar to that, but really different because it's smaller pieces and more of a rich flavor. Of course, anything you do yourself is, you know, usually better than something you're buying in a store like that. Anyway, if you don't have access to hog meat, to fresh hog meat or fresh hog fat to render your own lard, you can find cracklins and readily in most grocery stores. You can find them for sale. Making cracklin cornbread is really easy. It's as simple as taking your favorite cornbread recipe, whatever you're already using, whether you like yellow cornmeal or white cornmeal, if you want sweet milk or buttermilk, or you put an egg in it or you don't put an egg in it, and you throw the cracklins into the batter and mix it up before you bake it. I use a cup of cracklins for my cornbread recipe, but that's personal preference. You might want to use more cracklins or you might want to use less cracklins. That would just be up to you how you wanted to do it. And then you just bake the cornbread as usual, and then it's just really good because it's got those cracklins in it. But this book, Smokehouse Ham, Spoon Bread, and Scuppernong Wine by Joseph E. Dabney, it is a fantastic cookbook. The little tagline after the title is The Folklore and Art of Southern Appalachian Cooking. And it's got great recipes in it, really good recipes, but my favorite part is the folklore and the art part. It really gives detail about each recipe, and he shares these amazing little memories, or whatever you want to call it, from individuals. And I was going to read you the one about cracklin bread, or cracklin cornbread, it's Ruby Fowler Mooney. She was from Gilmer County, Georgia. So she says, cracklin bread, like as a question. My mother made it, and it was good. No matter how much she cooked, it was all gone when the meal was over. I make it this way. I take 1½ cups of self-rising meal, a good heaping cup of cracklins, and a cup of buttermilk. And I put in maybe 1/4 teaspoon of baking soda. And if that buttermilk don't make it up like you want it, you can add a little water. We growed our corn and took it to the grist mill up on the creek over here. Used to be a roadway up there, but the old road's growed up now. My great-grandfather, Fowler, used to run the mill. As a kid, I used to like to look down there and watch that big old wheel. They had a pole, and when they pulled it, that led up the gate, and the water run under it down the sluice. That mill was in operation until the early 50s. So that was Ruby Fowler from Ruby Fowler Mooney from Gilmer County, Georgia. It's got her little picture. I wish I could show it to you, but I don't guess I can. Anyway, but that's a really sweet memory there of her talking about cracklin bread. And it's when you're reading like I do about Appalachia and reading about memories and nostalgia, people talking about how their mother or grandmother cooked and how much they miss their cooking, that often comes up. A subject that often comes up is cracklin cornbread. So the cookbook does have a few recipes for cracklin bread. So today, I'm out of milk, to be honest with you. I usually put milk in my cornbread, but I have some buttermilk. So today I'm actually going to use one of the recipes in here instead of using mine. So I'll put the details down below in the description, but it's actually the recipe, and it's one of the reasons I want to make it is because it was submitted by Dwayne Oliver. So Dwayne Oliver wrote a lot about the Hazel Creek area of North Carolina. That was a part of the over near Fontana Lake, Fontana Dam. That was a part of the country there, the settlement, as Pap would say, that was isolated by the lake when the lake was built. It wasn't under the lake. It didn't end up being covered up with the lake like a lot of TVA lakes covered towns, and there certainly was some covered by Fontana, but the Hazel Creek area was just isolated and you could no longer reach it. Anyway, but Dwayne Oliver, he wrote a lot about and documented the life on Hazel Creek, but also the recipes of his grandmother, his mother, his aunts, and different family members. So I'm fascinated by that area, so I'm going to try his. Anyway, so he uses, well, I say I'm going to try his, but I'm actually doing it different. But this is his recipe. Is 1½ cups cornmeal, 1/4 cup of all-purpose flour, a 1/2 teaspoon baking soda, a 1/4 teaspoon salt, and 1 cup buttermilk, and then 1 cup finely diced cracklins. Well, I'm going to use 2 cups instead of dividing it up. I'm just using 2 cups of cornmeal I use is White Lily cornmeal mix. And a cornmeal mix means it already has the leavening in there, so there's already salt and baking powder or baking soda in there, so I don't have to worry about that. And so I'm going to use it instead of how he divided his between cornmeal and flour. And then I've got my buttermilk and my cracklins and my, let's see, he didn't call for an egg. I had an egg out, so I'm not going to put the egg in it. Anyway, so now I'm going to show you how to mix it up. So the first thing I do when I make cornbread is, you can see how hot my pan is. I go ahead and put whatever kind of oil, which I use lard or Crisco, in the pan, and then I put it in the oven and I let the oven come to heat. I'm going to bake this at 450 with that oil in there, so it's piping hot. So that's what I do first. So now I'm just going to add my buttermilk to my cornmeal mix. And we'll see if this turns out to be enough. I usually use, because I like a thinner cornbread, I usually use 1 1/3 cups of milk, of whole milk. And I usually use an egg too, so I'm going to get a little bit of water. So we're going to use Ruby's advice. We're going to add a little bit more water to the mixture. Okay, and then we're going to use our cracklins and see what they look like. I'm going to put them in. I'm losing them. Come back here. And then we're going to put it in the pan. You can kind of hear it start sizzling just as it gets in there. And then we're going to bake this for about 20 minutes. Of course, everybody's oven's different, so you may need to check on yours before that time and see how it's doing, but just till it's done. Okay, I just got the Cracklin Cornbread out of the oven. You can see it turned out really pretty. So of course I can't wait. It's almost supper time and Matt will be here. He's not home from work yet, but I'm going to go ahead and cut me a piece out of it so that you can see it. It's got that nice crispy crust, which is my favorite part of cornbread. We'll see. Ooh, just a little bit. You see the cracklins down in there where they leave those little places? Of course, I've got some butter because you know cracklins are not enough. Smear on there. So good. Cracklins just give it a different flavor, a richer flavor, as you think would, adding meat to something as you think it would. I swear, you can make a meal just on this, on the Cracklin Cornbread. Maybe have an onion to go with it. Of course, it'd be really good with soup beans. I always think of cornbread and beans. It'd be really good with kale lettuce, with fried potatoes. That'd be really good. We have leftover meatloaf from yesterday, so what Matt will be eating is, when he gets home from work, is Cracklin Cornbread and meatloaf and leftover green beans. We're trying to use up the last few jars of our green beans from last summer, so that before long, you know, it'll be time to start canning again. But I hope you enjoyed seeing how to make Cracklin Cornbread. I really didn't need to show you how. I just needed to tell you, throw some cracklins in your cornbread next time you're going to make it. It's really that simple. I will put the directions down below, the recipe that I used today, because it turned out especially good. And you can find cracklins readily available at most grocery stores. That's where the ones I used today come from, my local grocery store, because, you know, unfortunately, Pap's gone and Granny doesn't no longer render lard. That's a tongue twister. Maybe that's something that I need to start doing. Anyway, I hope you'll leave a comment. Let me know, have you ever had Cracklin Cornbread? Do you like Cracklin Cornbread? But mostly, please drop back by often and continue to help me celebrate Appalachia.